Basic commandlets for processes, services, and event logs. In this nugget, we're going to focus on some of the core commandlets that are built into Windows PowerShell to do some basic Windows administrative tasks. We'll be working with processes, Windows services, and Windows event logs. You're going to find that Windows PowerShell's default way of displaying information might not always be exactly what you need, so we'll talk about some display tips for making that information more useful. We're also going to talk about what's missing in the information that Windows PowerShell shows you. In other words, when you're looking at a process, what's PowerShell hiding? When you're looking at a service, what information is not available? That way you'll have a stronger idea and expectation of what you can and cannot do with Windows PowerShell. Finally, we'll talk about the difference between local and remote administration, so that you understand what your capabilities are on the local machine, and you understand where PowerShell version 1 fits in when it comes to managing remote computers. Let's get started with processes. We'll open up the shell and see what the shell knows how to do in terms of managing Windows processes. Now remember, the easiest way to find that out is to just ask PowerShell itself. Help star process star. Well, Windows PowerShell has help topics on two commandlets, get process and stop process. Now, just because PowerShell has help doesn't necessarily mean that these are the only things PowerShell knows how to do. So the other way of discovering functionality is to run get command star process star. This is also showing an external application called qprocess. Now, we're not going to mess with that. It looks like the get process and stop process commandlets are our two main choices. Running get process, by the way, I'll go ahead and tell you that the alias for this is PS. It's a pretty nice display of process information. We can see how many handles each process is using, non-paged memory in kilobytes, paged memory in kilobytes, the working set in kilobytes, virtual memory in kilobytes, and CPU utilization for seconds. Now that's not a percentage, that's the number of CPU seconds that the process has gotten. We can also see the process ID and the process name. All good information. Let's see what else we can do with get process. Well, not much. It looks like we can either get all the processes, get a specific process by ID, let's say ID 480 there, get process ID 480. Okay, just to get one process. We can get a process by name too. Get process, I'm sure there's a service host running on here. There are several instances of it, as a matter of fact, so that's a useful way to pull all those up all at once. So this is how we can get the processes. Now maybe this isn't exactly the information you wanted to look at, so later in this nugget we'll look at ways to sort of change the way this information is displayed a little bit. What about that other command we saw? Help stop process. Stops one or more running processes. See, I can stop it by ID, by name, or by something called input object. And we're going to put that off until a later nugget. Right now, let's focus on the ID and the name. It looks like ID is the default. I don't have to specify -ID, provided the first parameter I give it is an integer. And here's an interesting couple of parameters, what if and confirm. Alright, you know what? Let's get the processes again. And let's go crazy. Let's take the Local Security Authority Service, LSASS. That's ID 568. Stop process. Oh, there's an alias for it called kill, which is much more satisfying. So let's stop process 568. Normally stopping the LSA would blue screen the computer. I don't really want to do that. Let's ask it what if. Oh, it's telling me it would have performed the operation stop process on the target LSASS, which is ID 568. That's pretty cool. What if I say skill name service host? Is this going to just kill the first one it finds, or is it going to kill all of them? Well, show me what if. Oh, it would have actually performed that against each and every one of them. I'm glad I asked it what if. What about confirm? What's that do? Oh, do you want to run stop process on the service host with the ID 816? No, I don't. Do you want to do it on ID 884? You know what? I really don't want to do it to any of them. Let's answer L for no to all. and we'll just get out of that. So that's kind of an interesting couple of parameters. In Windows PowerShell, any commandlet which has the ability to reconfigure or modify the system should support either -whatif or -confirm. Most of the time you'll see it supporting both of them simultaneously, or it won't support either of them at all. For example, if we looked at help for get process, since this commandlet does not reconfigure the system or make any changes, it does not support -confirm or -whatif. So those are some fun things we can do with processes. We can get them all. See, that scrolled off the screen, so let's try piping it to more. That worked in command.exe, so I just want to see if it works here. Oh, and it certainly does. That's great. I can hit space for the next page. So lots of different capabilities, but now you know how to get a list of processes. You know how to kill a process. Let's illustrate this with kind of a practical thing. Let's run a copy of calc. We'll put that in the background, but you see that it's still down here on the taskbar. And then let's just kill name calc. Remember, I don't have to type the entire parameter name. I just have to type enough to distinguish it from other parameters, and -na should be enough. Yep, and there it goes. Good, so that works exactly as I expected. So that's some basic process management you can do on Windows PowerShell. Now let's see what Windows PowerShell can do for services. Get command star service star. A lot of stuff there, some commandlets, some applications. Looks like we can, well, I've got this QAD service in here, and that's coming out of the Quest Active Directory stuff. So let's kind of narrow it down to just services. GCM noun service. There we go. We can get a service. Let's see, get service. Yep, that's a list of services, all right. There they all are. We can create a new service, restart a service, resume, set, start, stop, and suspend. Now let's try and find something a little harmless like bits here. Help, suspend, service. Looks like all I have to do is give it a name. Okay, I can do that. Suspend service bits. Cannot be suspended because the service does not support being suspended or resumed. That's okay. Some services don't. Let's just try stopping it. Stop service bits. Get service is a bit much to type now. GSV, that's the alias for it. Get service bits. It stopped. Good. Start service bits. Get service bits. Good. It's started again. So that's a lot of great ways to administer services. You can definitely do a lot of different things. Let's check out the help for get service. Looks like we can specify name. We can specify parameters like include and exclude. Let's look at what those do. Let me get service. I want to get everything. I don't want to specify name. I just want to say include everything with a B in the name. So that's sort of a way to filter, to change and just look at specific sets of results. Maybe I want to get everything that does not have a B in the name. So that's everything else. So everything that does not start with B. Let's ask for help on that new service. Let's see, this lets me specify a name for the service. The path to the service is binary, that's required. The display name is optional. I imagine it would stick in a blank otherwise. Description is also optional there. I can specify the startup type of automatic, manual, or disabled. I specify a credential, a PS credential. We'll have to look at that in just a second. It depends on. That can be a list of other services that it depends on. And because this is modifying the system, I have the options to use what if or -confirm. Now, I don't actually have an executable to stick in here, but I do want to talk about this PS credential thing. Anytime you're going to need to put a credential into a parameter like that, you have a couple of options. I could just type new service, put in whatever name I wanted, whatever the binary path is going to be, and specify the credential. And the easiest way to probably do this is just to specify the username. Alternatively, you can specify the get credential command in parentheses. That'll force Windows PowerShell to execute the get credential command, and the credential that comes out of it will be passed off as your credential parameter. Let's run get credential by itself just to see what it does. Okay, it says I have to provide a username. We'll call it administrator, and a password. Okay, and then it returned that credential, and you can see that it's the administrator username and that the password is stored in memory as a secure string, so that I don't have to worry about that being kept in this clear text or anything else. So let's go back up and look at some of our other options for working with services. Looks like we've got get service, which we've done. We've looked at new service, restart, resume, start, stop, suspend. I think we can probably figure out what those do. Is set service. Let's see what that guy does. Set service. Changes the display name, description, or starting mode of a service. Oh, so I could type set service bits to use a startup. And I'm not going to type the whole startup type parameter name. I don't need to. Just looks like start is sufficient. And we'll change it to disabled. But before we actually do it, let's make sure we're doing the right thing. Okay, that would have performed set service against the target background intelligent transfer service, or bits. So knowing that that's what I wanted to do and that it wasn't going to pick up some other service out of the clear blue sky, I'll go ahead and run it again. And that time it changed it. So let's get service bits. There it is. Oh, it's still running. And interestingly, this display does not show me the startup type. So that's something that we'll have to look at in just a little bit to see if we can pull that information out. But those are some of the things you can do with services that are built into Windows PowerShell. And I think we figured out earlier that the only command that PowerShell has for working with event logs is just the one get event log. So let's look at the help for that. Get event log. It gets information. We can either use -list to list all the event logs, or -log name, or just provide the name of the log. And we have an option when we're getting events out of a log to just get the newest however many we want. If you remember, I had created an alias for this in a previous nugget, so I'm going to use gel instead of get event log. We'll go for the system and just get the newest 10. Okay, index number, the time it was written, what type of log entry this is. These are both infos. The source, where it came from, who wrote that. You can see that DHCP and DCOM and a few different ones wrote. The event ID and the message. And unfortunately, the source and the message are both being cut off. So that's something we're going to need to look at in a little bit to see if we can't display more of that information than what we have right here. Let's take another look up here at the help. Now, there's also this common parameters thing. Gosh, it would sure be nice, because we've seen that on all the helps. If we go back to help for get process, common parameters. If we go back to help for get service, yeah, common parameters. What are these common parameters? Let's see if PowerShell knows. Help star, common star. And it turns out there's a help topic about common parameters. These are parameters that every commandlet supports. When a commandlet supports it, the use of the parameter does not cause an error. However, the parameter might not have any effect in some commandlets. We've got verbose, debug, error action, others. Oh, and here's the what if and confirm. These are supported by commandlets that change the system state. Let's try running our get event log again and see if verbose does anything. Nope, but it didn't cause an error either. Let's see if debug does anything. Nope, but it didn't cause an error. So some of those different common parameters might have an effect with different commandlets that you use. So it's always worth trying them from time to time just to see if you're going to get anything out of them. And now you also have an idea of what you can do with event logs in Windows PowerShell. Doesn't look like we have any way to write information to an event log, and it also didn't look like we had any way to reconfigure event log parameters, but we can very easily get information out of the event logs, and that's definitely useful. What would be more useful, though, is if we could get PowerShell to give us a little bit more information, or let us decide what information we want to look at. See, when I run get service, and PowerShell displays the status, the name, and the display name, there actually is more information PowerShell could be displaying, and it's capable of displaying the full information without cutting it off and putting the 3 little dots in the ellipsis. So this is really all part of PowerShell's formatting subsystem, and it's something we're going to talk about in a later nugget. But for right now, I want to kind of give you a little bit of a shortcut so that you can get to more information if you need to. Just run whatever command you plan to run, and type the pipe character, and type format list star. That's going to reformat the information so that instead of showing up in columns like this, it shows up in a list and displays all star, all of the properties or information that is available for whatever it is you're displaying. So this is going to take just a couple of minutes to run, and it's displaying name, whether or not it can pause and continue, the status, the service type, the machine name, all kinds of information. Let's try it with get event log we'll do the security log this time and just get the newest 5, pipe, format, list. You know what, if you're tired of typing format list, there's an alias, FL, so just FL star. Wow, there's actually a lot of information for an event here. The ID, the machine name it came from, the index, the complete message gets listed. Nothing's being cut off here. The replacement strings that are used, the source where it came from. This is great information. So this is a really good tip for being able to display whatever information you need. Let's try it with processes. Process FL star. Lots of information. I'm going to hit Control C so we don't have to sit and wait for all that to go by. Wow, we've got the name, how many handles it's using, the company, the path of the actual executable, a description of the process, the product that it goes with, just tons of information that's available. So normally when we run PS, we just get this column, a 7-column display. Just so you understand, these 7 columns are ones that were pre-selected by Microsoft's Windows PowerShell team as kind of the ones that most administrators would be looking at most of the time. They knew that you would sometimes need to get more pieces of information, and that's why they gave us the ability to run it with this FL star, format list star. Give me all the information. And as I said in a later nugget, we're actually going to explore some other ways that you can really fine-tune this display and create just the format you want. So you've got that to look forward to. Right now, though, I want to kind of give you an idea of what PowerShell can and cannot do. I don't want you sitting out there banging your head against a wall trying to get PowerShell to give you some piece of information that PowerShell just doesn't want to give you. For example, let's take a look at that help set service command again. Notice that one of the things this is allowing me to do is change the startup type. I can change it to automatic, manual, or disabled. And when I create a new service, I have something similar there. I can set the startup type to be automatic, manual, or disabled. But when I get a service, even if I do the FL star trick, I don't see the startup mode here. And you know what else I don't see is the logon account that this service is starting up with. So what we're looking at is a limitation, not so much of Windows PowerShell, but of the underlying Microsoft .NET framework. See, PowerShell is built on top of the framework. And these commands that I've shown you so far, get process, get service, and get event log, are all using the .NET framework to retrieve processes, services, and event logs. And in this case, the underlying .NET framework simply does not include the startup mode or the logon account information for this service. And if you go back to set service and look at the help, you can specify a credential when you're creating a new service, but there's no way to change the credential of an existing service, nor is there a way to change the password. So there are definitely limitations in Windows PowerShell. There are things that are missing. Now, in the next nugget, we're going to look at a technology called Windows Management Instrumentation. It does not use the .NET framework, and so it doesn't have some of these limitations. And Windows PowerShell works great with it. So you can use Windows PowerShell to do a lot more. You just have to use a slightly different set of techniques to sort of get there. Okay, and the last thing to talk about is kind of unfortunately another thing PowerShell can't do. Let's take a look at one of those commandlet help files again, get event log. Do you see the parameter where I would specify the alternate computer? In other words, if I wanted to get event log entries from a different machine, not this one, how would I do that? Yeah, the parameter's not here. Let's look at those common parameters, though, in case it's buried in there. Verbose, debug, error action, error variable, out buffer, what if, and confirm. Nope, doesn't look like there's any way to retrieve event logs from a remote computer. How about get process? Nope, doesn't look like there's anything there either. How about get service? No, not there either. Well, so what you're looking at is kind of a limitation of PowerShell version 1. In version 1 of PowerShell, all of these commandlets are designed to run only against the local computer. There's no way to use these to reach out to a remote computer. Now that might seem like an extreme bummer, but hang on just a second. As I said, there's a couple of ways to do almost anything in Windows PowerShell. The way we've been doing things so far is using Windows PowerShell commandlets. And there's a few things that are kind of unique about those. First of all, they're all based on the .NET framework. And that sort of limits the information they return. Commandlets are also non-remoting, at least in this version of Windows PowerShell. That's something the Windows PowerShell team wants to address in a future version. So commandlets are easy to use, and they do have built-in help. So commandlets aren't all bad, they're just sort of limited to the local machine. In the next nugget, we're going to talk about a technology called Windows Management Instrumentation, or WMI. This does not use the .NET framework. It's kind of its own architecture. In addition, it does support remoting, built right into WMI. So you can reach out and manage remote machines. That's really the big reason to use WMI. However, it's a bit more complicated than commandlets, and unfortunately, there's no built-in help. There is some documentation, though, and we'll take a look at that in the next nugget. So I want you to understand that while Windows PowerShell's commandlets for managing processes, services, and event logs do have some limitations, they do have some benefits too, particularly the fact that they're easy and they have built-in help. When you need to overcome those limitations, you can use a technology like WMI, which uses its own architecture so that it can be more complete and which has built-in remoting. Although it does have the disadvantages of being more complicated and not coming with any kind of built-in help. So you've really got a couple of options to do whatever you need to get done. You can either use what's in the shell, you can turn to WMI, and there are some other technologies we'll be exploring in later nuggets too that will sort of help you work around some other limitations that you might run into in PowerShell. In this nugget, we looked at some of the basic commandlets for managing processes, services, and event logs in Windows PowerShell. We covered get process, as well as other commandlets that can be used to manage processes. We looked at all the things Windows PowerShell can do with services. And we looked at Windows PowerShell's ability to pull information from Windows event logs. Because some of the default display settings aren't exactly the most useful, we looked at some tips for changing the way PowerShell displays information. We also looked at some of the information that PowerShell doesn't give you right out of the box. And we looked at the difference between the information PowerShell can work with locally versus the information that PowerShell can work with remotely. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.